America's the greatest country in the world. Welcome to our special, The Foundation of America. Let's talk about this country of ours. And we can use this right now. Just take some time, sit back, think about our country, who we were, who we can maybe be again. I've said this forever, that our country can't be saved through politics. Politics is important. It's part of it. I'm not saying it's nothing. Think about it like this. If life is basketball, politics is dribbling. It's important. I'm not saying you don't have to ever dribble, but you got to score points to win the game. And the thing that wins the game, the thing that will save our country is not dribbling better, although you got to dribble. The thing that's going to save our country is virtue. All of our founding fathers recognize this. This is the core of everything they stood for and everything they built into this country. They knew there was no way that this country that they were creating would survive, even with the best, most perfectly written constitution or the best system of government or with angels among men in the government. It wouldn't work if people didn't have virtue. Real quick, let's define virtue. It means a person of moral excellence, something you're always striving for and to be better and better at, because you can't obviously be perfect. It's from the Latin word vir, V-I-R, which means man. So virtue means to be a man, which is, by the way, why the devil made up this term toxic masculinity, to make being a man, that is having virtue, seem like a bad thing. So our founders, who were in charge of coming up with a government, that's great, but their prime goal in life was self-governance. Virtue. There was a 19th century minister, Henry Ward Beecher. He said, "There is no liberty to men who do not know how to govern themselves." But let's go back to our founding fathers. John Adams said it this way. He said, "Public virtue cannot exist in a nation without private virtue." And public virtue is the only foundation of republics. So we need the private virtue first before we can move on to the public one. George Washington said, "Virtue or morality is a necessary spring of popular government." So the source of. And George Washington said, "Human rights can only be assured among a virtuous people." James Madison, he wrote the Constitution, he said, "To suppose that any form of government will secure liberty or happiness without any virtue in the people is a chimerical," that means imaginary, idea. So the idea that we think government will make us happy or government will give us liberty, no. It must be virtue. Sam Adams, "Neither the wisest constitution nor the wisest laws will secure the liberty and happiness of a people whose manners are universally corrupt." So without virtue. "He therefore is the truest friend of liberty, of his country, who tries most to promote its virtue." How about that from Sam Adams? If you want to be encouraged about virtue, the truest friend of liberty, of this country, is the person who's talking about virtue. Go back to John Adams. He said, "Our Constitution is made not only for a moral and, was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. The only way this country will work is if we're a virtuous people." The lengths that our founding fathers went to do this, it's quite inspiring, but we can do it today. Ben Franklin narrowed the virtues down to 13. He made a chart for himself every day, and he would check off if he lived that virtue today. His 13 virtues were temperance, silence, order, resolution, frugality, industry, sincerity, justice, moderation, cleanliness, tranquility, chastity, and humility. Aristotle had virtues as well: courage, temperance, generosity, magnanimity, honor, patience, honesty, humor, modesty, fairness. I'm missing one or two. But the point is, wise people, from Aristotle to Ben Franklin, were intentional about virtue. They had a list of virtues that they tried to live every single day, and they would self-reflect on whether or not they did. They were intentional about it. And today, people can't even name a virtue. Can't name one. Very different place. Now, liberty and virtue kind of seem like opposite things, right? Liberty is like, I can do whatever I want. And virtue is, I can't do the things I want. Right? That's how those are characterized today, but that's not it. Liberty doesn't mean doing whatever you want. It's doing what you ought. Liberty and virtue are the same thing, really, or they're directly connected. It's liberty, you can only achieve liberty if you are living a life of virtue. Liberty is not doing self-destructive things just because you can. It's doing what you should do. So we've forgotten that part of virtue. Or I should say, we've forgotten that part of liberty. We have forgotten the virtue part of liberty. So therefore, we've created freedom to just mean do whatever you want, and it's led us to disaster. Well, you're free to steal, you're free to murder. Half of murders go unsolved in this country. Most crimes go unsolved in this country. But YOLO, whatever, do what feels good in the moment. And I shouldn't have just said crimes, because there's a lot of bad things that people do that aren't a crime. They're not against the law. But whatever, it feels good in the moment, so I'm just going to do it. Don't even get me started on abortion right now. Right? It's like, well, I'm going to have abortion. Well, hold on. Why did you get pregnant at all in the first place? Well, it just felt good in the moment. And that's what I got to have premarital sex all the time. No virtue allowed. You can't even have that conversation in the abortion space. I know I'm quoting John Adams a lot, but he's pretty big on this one. So I love this letter he wrote because it was right in the midst of the revolution. He wrote this in 1776. He said, I sometimes tremble to think that although we are engaged in the best cause that ever employed the human heart, I love that, yet the prospect of success is doubtful. Right? So we're doing the best thing imaginable, trying to create this country. But are we going to be successful? Probably not. Not because of lack of power or lack of wisdom, but lack of virtue. Isn't that amazing? John is like, we're doing the best thing we could ever do. We're just starting this revolution. Probably not going to work. It's probably not going to do it. Why? You don't have enough wisdom? No, we got a lot of wisdom. You don't have enough power or military? It's like, well, no, but that's not going to be the reason it doesn't work. The reason it doesn't work is because we don't have enough virtue. Have I impressed the importance of this topic on you? Because I know we talk about this a lot on my radio show, and every once in a while I still get people who are like, why do you talk so much about it? It's like, I don't know, it's the most important thing. John Adams thought we would lose the revolution because we weren't virtuous enough. So where did this come from, our founding fathers, though? Well, our founding fathers grew up in a culture. Our founding fathers grew up in a culture that was established by who I call our founding grandfathers. It goes back to the Pilgrims, the Puritans. They came here before the founders, and they created a culture that our founders then grew up in. We'll talk more about the Pilgrims a little later. Just one, I'll put aside here before we get to our wonderful guests. We had in this country, we had sumptuary laws. So these were laws against sin, or even more specifically, like against excess. So John Adams in 1776, he said the happiness of the people might be greatly promoted by these laws. Frugality is a great revenue, besides curing us of vanities, levities, and fopperies, which are real antidotes to the great manly and warlike virtues. So there were actual laws that said you can't waste your money on stupid stuff. There was an article, the Massachusetts Bill of Rights, and it called, there were laws about virtue. You needed to keep a constant adherence to piety, justice, moderation, temperance, industry, frugality, and all these different virtues, because they are of this is what the Bill of Rights in Massachusetts said, because they are absolutely necessary to preserve the advantages of liberty. That's how deeply our founding generation knew virtue was, that when they wrote these documents, they said you also have to be a virtuous person, otherwise none of this will work. There was also efforts to put sumptuary laws in the Constitution, but those were shot down. Now, I'm not saying we need to pass those types of laws today. I prefer we have a voluntarily virtuous people in this nation. But again, just at the extent that our founding generations focused on virtue, to the point of passing laws to enforce virtue. And today we have no idea what we're doing. The true founding of America was virtue. That's what pursuit of happiness means, right? Some of the most famous lines about this country ever written, right? You're free to pursue happiness. But it's nothing like what we mean today, right? Happiness today is like this fleeting, again, whatever makes me feel good. That's not what our founding fathers meant. Happiness to our founding fathers was virtue. The only way to be happy was to live a virtuous life. Ben Franklin said, the science of virtue is of more wealth and of more consequence to man's happiness than all the rest of the sciences put together. Thomas Jefferson, who wrote Pursuit of Happiness, said the order of nature to be that individual happiness shall be inseparable from the practice of virtue. He wrote in another letter, he said, without virtue, happiness cannot be. And Thomas Jefferson's the one who wrote happiness, pursuit of happiness, in the Declaration of Independence. Happiness to them was only possible by living a virtuous life. And to pursue something back then, it didn't mean to chase after necessarily. It was more to practice it, to strive for, to live a life of. So a modern translation of pursuit of happiness really is the practice of virtue.